You have cancer. 3 words that change a life forever. We would like to offer another 3 words. Be an overcomer. Welcome to the 1% Podcast, where our conversations with other cancer warriors, survivors, and caregivers allows us to give you that extra boost you need to face your challenge head on, live life from a new perspective, and forge a path that keeps you moving free and clear. Now, welcome your host and cancer survivor, Truett Taylor.
Welcome to today's episode of the 1% Podcast, the show where we interview young adults who are battling or surviving an unexpected cancer diagnosis. You are not alone, and I promise, by consuming today's content, your soul will be fed with the hope, courage, and inspiration you need to keep fighting for today. I'm excited to be on your journey with you today. If you haven't done so already, be sure to head over to 1%podcast.com to sign up for our email list to see the latest news and updates for all our guests on the show. You can also check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1% Podcast. If you want to join in on some of our discussions, please join our Facebook group, the 1% Podcast. To contact me directly for content, questions, or booking events, you can email me at info@1%podcast.com. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 25th episode of the 1% Podcast. Excited to be with you guys today. Our 1% moment of truth today is going to be about purpose. Picasso said, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. One of my core values and beliefs is that God has made each one of us perfectly with a unique set of talents and abilities. I was up late last night watching the end of the Texans versus Titans game because I have a fantasy football team with all my friends that was 1 point away from losing, and it kind of made me stay up and watch it a little more than I wanted to. May sound a little trivial, but when you have the type of friends that I have, you cannot get away with losing at anything. And plus, I talk a tremendous amount of trash with all of my friends, so I may have to make sure that everything worked out and I could back it all up. But anyway, after the game, I was waiting for my blood pressure to go down a little bit, and I was flipping through the channels, and I caught the very end of The Blind Side. If you're not familiar with The Blind Side, it's the true story of Michael Oher. He was a kid from one of the worst parts of Memphis, Tennessee, who was adopted by Leanne and Sean Tuohy. The movie shows Michael's life prior to meeting the Tuohys as a homeless teenager who was sleeping in the high school gym with only the shirt and shorts he was wearing. And his mother was into drugs, and he had ran away from home and just basically lived a pretty terrible life, going from foster home to foster home and just not working out. But anyways, it was extremely tough, and he had no father figure and no experience with anything in life except for drugs and violence. So Leanne Tuohy basically goes in, picks him up, offers him dinner, gives him a place to stay, and they start their relationship. The rest of the movies kind of shows how they got him into football, which he was completely not used to playing football or any other sport or anything like that. They really taught him how to play football. Long story short, he ended up getting highly recruited by several colleges, especially here in the SEC, and he decided to go to Ole Miss, and he was later drafted in the first round by the Baltimore Ravens back in 2009. So I got to thinking, like, what are the odds that a kid who lives this like a terrible life and has almost like no hope if you saw him when he was younger to meet someone, and after meeting them, his purpose in life starts to really form. And all the talents that he has. I know several people who practice so hard and who's go to spend all this money on all these camps and everything else to really push their kids through. And here comes a guy who just has this God-given natural talent and ability to play football, makes it into the NFL. So it kind of made me start thinking about, have you ever asked yourself the question of what's my purpose? What's my plan? How do I find out? What's a purpose-driven life look like? To figure out where your purpose is, I feel like you have to start out by figuring out what it's not first. There are so many things that we allow into our life that distract us from living out our purpose. So I'll put together a list of 6 things. 3 things which show you what's not your purpose, and 3 things that show you what your purpose may be. So let's start with what's not your purpose. Number 1, your purpose is not to be perfect. We've all seen it. The perfect person on Instagram with the perfect body, on the perfect vacation, with the perfect family, doing perfect things. Let me remind you, this isn't real life. With that kind of perception being reality these days, it really makes us start to compare our lives and become disappointed and very ungrateful for what we do have. And don't get me wrong, I'm all a fan of practicing something as hard as you can so you can make as little mistakes as possible, but trying to always be perfect is a huge mistake. It's our imperfections that make us unique and allow us to connect with others. The second thing, living for others. It's not your purpose. It's not your purpose to be responsible for everyone else's happiness. Your spouse, your family, your kids, you're a part of that equation. You're not the entire motivating factor for everyone to always be happy. I'm not talking about moments or seasons where people need support and need you to be that person, but I'm talking about you having the sole responsibility for making someone else happy. That is not your purpose. And lastly, being selfish. I can personally attest to this weakness when I look back at several moments in my life. It's the complete opposite of the last point I just made. Living only for yourself is a very short-term mindset and only leaves you feeling lonely in the end. Whether it's choosing to get involved with the wrong person in the wrong relationship, spending your money on useless things that you don't need, or being the center of attention in every conversation, being selfish is not your purpose. So what is your purpose? Number one, your purpose is to grow. Like I mentioned earlier, you've been given a specific set of talents and abilities. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations and allow yourself to explore and grow. What if I'm not good at anything? That's something that I hear people say all the time. That only means that you haven't tried enough stuff. If you find yourself uncomfortable but having fun, you know you're growing. Number two is to share. Don't die with the music inside of you. That's what Wayne Dyer said. Don't be afraid to share, communicate your opinions, thoughts, dreams, desires, and failures with other people. Someone will listen, and someone will be inspired and motivated by what means the most to you. And lastly, find your passion. I love this quote by T.D. Jakes. He says, if you don't know your purpose, find your passion. Your passion will always lead to your purpose. So what are you most passionate about? Make a list. Share your list. You'll find yourself sacrificing more time and having more energy to do what you're passionate about. Feed that fire and watch your purpose become completely clear. All right, I'm very excited to have Miss Erica Hoffman be on our show today. Erica is a stage 4 colon cancer warrior and a voice coach for Jan Smith Studios. Erica has a blog out called thetruthitworks.com. You can follow her on Instagram at EVEHOFF214. And Erica's going to share today with everyone how to ask for help, have faith, and when you think about it, this isn't it. Sorry, my voice gave out for a second. This isn't it. But she shares how there's a silver lining in everything that we go through. So enjoy my interview with Erica Hoffman. Erica, welcome to the show today. How you doing?
Hi, Truett. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good. Glad to have you on the show. I know it was our second time chatting. We had several chats before, actually. So looking forward to be able to share your story with all of our listeners today. I think the world of you and just the things people are going to get from your story today, I think are going to really impact them to the highest level. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
All righty. Well, my name is Erica Valentina Hoffman, and I live in Lawrenceville, Georgia, which is just north of Atlanta. I am a stage 4 cancer warrior right now. I was diagnosed when I was 33. Yes, 33, October of 2015. And at the time, I was working as a vocal coach at Jan Smith Studios and closer to the city.
Gotcha. Look, if you have a chemo brain moment, we all get it. So just roll with it. So you're good to go.
All right. That sounds good. Thank you.
But why don't you tell us a little bit about why you feel like it's important for you to be able to share your story with all of our listeners today?
That's a great question. I have learned that in sharing my story, it's opened up conversations with people that maybe I wouldn't have talked to before, not because I wouldn't want to, but it pokes at something that's happening in their life. And a lot of times it pokes at something where they even either had cancer, they've known somebody with cancer, they've suffered through the death or multiple deaths of somebody who lost their lives to cancer. And so when somebody meets you and you have a story that doesn't look like unicorns and sparkles, and they go, oh, wow, you're human too. That it connects us on a deeper level than just, hey, yeah, how are you doing? Okay, got 5 kids and like a picket fence, and the shallow story that we all get oftentimes. So it bypasses that, I think.
Yeah, that common bond that we have together, this it's unspoken, I would say. As we talk, we both know that we've experienced a lot of the similar things. And I was just at a cancer conference 2 weeks ago, and just in the room, like, you didn't have to describe yourself that much to each person because you all have to experience something very similar. So for everyone listening today, you're not alone. Erica's story is going to just bless you guys, and you're going to get a really she's going to really dig deep inside of her and share the story with you guys, and you're going to absolutely love it. So a lot of twists and turns, bumps in the road, but that's life, right?
It's absolutely life. You got to get your boots on and go deep. We're getting dirty.
Why don't you tell all our listeners what it was like, what your life was like prior to your diagnosis?
Well, I thought that I was living kind of like the dream life. I was a 30-something that had just been married. I was living in Norcross and moved to the other side of town with my husband. We bought our first house. We got to do a lot of firsts, in terms of painting the whole entire house, and doing things that you feel like you should do when you're newly married. I was working at Jan Smith Studios as a vocal coach, and that was something that was also a big surprise. That was another dream come true, because I got to work with somebody who is very high up in her field, who is an amazing person overall. And I felt like I was able to partner up and learn. I mean, I felt like I was drinking through a fire hydrant with how much I learned in a very short amount of time. So I had this new house, and I had this great job, and a lot of the goals that I had for life were surrounded, being able to do things with my husband, being able to grow the business at the studio, and be able to explore different facets of teaching, whether it was group classes or summer camps or, whatever we could offer that were maybe a different component of education. And then at the time, I had gone through this, I guess you could call it a fitness course. It was 6 months long. It was called Leanness Lifestyle University. And it was an online format. And you had a group of people that you were, kind of fighting through the fat fight with, and you got rewarded, not just from, losing the weight, but sometimes there was a monetary incentive. Sometimes there was an accolade. And so when you were done, you felt like, wow, I really achieved something, because it wasn't just kind of like an average, okay, eat this and exercise and you're good. It was very in-depth. So I learned a lot about health, and I was at my peak. I was probably the smallest I've ever been in my life, and probably the strongest. So as you can tell, there were a lot of things that were going really well.
Yeah. So life was moving along. Everything's great with your husband. You're in the best shape of your life. Then that day comes. Tell us about the day that you were diagnosed. Give us some specific details on what, I guess, led up to that, and then the exact day. Where were you at? What was said? And then how did you feel about that?
Well, I remember standing in the doorway of my studio, and I was talking to a parent. And at that point in time, I was the most miserable that I had ever felt in my entire life. I had dropped about 29 pounds in a matter of a couple of weeks. I couldn't keep anything down. I was vomiting all the time. I couldn't sleep. Nausea medicines weren't helping. And I was exhausting every possibility except for cancer, because it just didn't dawn on me. Cancer, no one expects it. And I remember the student's mother kind of chuckling with me, and she's like, well, at least it's not cancer. And and so I'm going, oh yeah, maybe it'll get better. I remember walking into my studio staff meeting, and I was kind of running late that day, And I walked in and they all looked at me as if a ghost had entered. I mean, they all actually have told me, my boss, my coworkers, that what they saw that day was shocking. And they knew something was really wrong. And it was maybe a day or two after that it's like, let's go to the hospital. We need to go to the ER. So my husband drove me to the ER. I was in a ton of pain. They put me on morphine. And they kept on saying, well, there's a mass. And you're like, okay, that's great. But what is it? And, well, we got to do a CT scan. Okay. So we do a CT scan. I've never been in a CT scan before. And then they're like, well, we don't know what it is. So they're like, well, we're going to do an endoscopy, which is, the one that goes down your esophagus.
Right.
And internally, I'm thinking, no. The problem isn't my esophagus. And I happened to say that I had acid reflux. I'm like, no. It's something else. And finally, on October 21st, when they did the colonoscopy, they found stage 4 colon. Actually, at that point, they thought it was stage 3. Stage 3 colon cancer. 80% of my colon was occluded with a tumorous mass. They found a polyp in my sigmoid colon. They found a polyp in my transverse colon, but they were non-cancerous. And then they removed 12 inches of my ascending colon, as well as my appendix, and 16 lymph nodes. So when I was done with the colonoscopy, obviously prior to the surgery, the the gastroenterologist, he almost wouldn't even look at me because I guess it was just that bad. And I'm like, is it parasites?
Right.
And he's probably going, wow, she's still kind of loopy. And then he handed me the picture. He handed me the report that had 6 different pictures of my colon. It did not register. I mean, I remember trying so hard to understand what was going on. And Matt, my husband, was standing there, and I remember him talking to me. I just don't remember what he said.
Yeah.
So later on, when the anesthesia had worn off, and he's sitting there, and his eyes are bleary, like red, and bloodshot, and has this worried look on his face. He was the one that said, it's cancer. And I remember a few things went through my head at that moment. I thought, okay, wasn't expecting that. Mm-mm. And then I thought, well, my mom had breast cancer, and she's going through her second round of it, or I think at that point it might have been even her third round of it. So if she got through it, then, well, I should get through it, right? And so I thought, okay, we can beat this. But I think, in that moment, and you make this sort of declaration,
Yeah.
it still really hasn't settled in
Right.
what it entails, So I remember the oncologist came in, and he was this very sweet, gentle Sri Lankan man. And he kind of, we're going to look at chemo, and we need to see if there's any other spots. And he was very genteel. It was very easy to like him. And make a long story short, he's still my oncologist, and he's been treating me for 3 years.
Yeah. So you said you kind of put a stake in the ground. I was like, listen, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to go at this. I've seen my mom go through this, and I've seen what she's gone through, but I'm going to fight just as hard. So you got that mindset. Obviously you were shocked like everyone else at first. You see your husband and you're like, oh my gosh, he's worried. So that has to play a little bit into the emotions that you're having, but then you make up your mind that you're going to fight this and keep going forward. But that's great. That's what some of us, I guess, let's just go that route at first, and then treatment starts, right? And
then treatment starts.
Yeah. And then you realize, like, wait a minute, your body's physically going through something that you've never experienced before, you weren't prepared for, and all the side effects kind of come with that. Why don't you describe your treatment regimen and how the process has been since you first started and kind of all the way up to where you are now?
When I was finally staged correctly, which was stage 4, there was a very big discussion over whether or not I would go the chemo route or if they would go in and resect my liver, if they'd resect my lung, or both, or neither. And when they finally decided on chemo, it still didn't quite hit, because the only base of reference that I had for chemotherapy was my mom. And also, like I would say most people, the only reference base that anybody has is what you see them go through on the outside and what they tell you. But the internal part of it is lacking. You can't know what it's, you can't. It truly is one of those things you got to walk a mile in a man's shoes, and you'll know what's going on.
Right.
I butcher aphorisms and axioms, by the way, just
That's
letting
okay.
you know. So we went the chemo route and no radiation. I was on, I think initially, I want to say like 8 months of treatment. And then I was able to come off of it. And the treatment was Folfox, which is a nice cocktail of drugs, including leucovorin, including 5-fluorouracil, or 5-FU. It's the drug that gives you the middle finger. And then Avastin. And I'd say that the side effects that really got me the most were the neuropathy and not being able to swallow or handle cold of any kind. Even if it was room temperature, I couldn't handle it. I felt like I was swallowing shards of glass. If I walked around in Publix for too long, I couldn't breathe because the air conditioning was so cold. So not only is it cold, but your sensitivity is increased. And then on top of that, it makes you, like if you touch anything cold, it makes you feel like you have frostbite, or if you, breathe it in, everything's constricting. So I'd say between that, obviously bowel issues.
Yeah.
It's like we are the quote unquote butt of many jokes.
Isn't it funny how, like, I know that's funny. It's hard to explain, but people listening to this will know, like, how your dignity just completely goes out the window when it comes down to having bowel issues and bowel cancer and all those things. I tell everybody, I feel like everyone in Atlanta has seen me naked, probably, and you just get used to it because that's part of it, and just roll with it, and that's how it goes. And same thing with the bowel issues as well too. You get comfortable doing what you got to do whenever you got to do it, and that's just part of living with colon cancer for sure. So
absolutely. It's one of those things that I remember my husband, he was a Marine. You don't say was for Marine, sorry. He is a Marine. He's a veteran. And I remember him talking about some components of war, like when he first went overseas and the first time that he heard bullets whizzing past his head and the shock of they're actually trying to kill me. He's like, there's no other sensation like it. You just, because you don't walk around life thinking that someone's going to be shooting at you, right? Or coming at you with a knife or trying to run their car into you. You think you have this, I'd say, very fragile sense of security, especially when it comes to other people. But specifically when that sensation, that thought process that only you can know if you've been there. And so with the chemo, it was very much, those words came back to me. I'm like, man, I could use all the words possibly known to man and still never be able to completely describe how it felt.
Yeah.
So you can come close, I suppose, right?
Right. So you were on the Folfox for, you said 8 months, you said? Did you,
Yep.
And you had surgery. Did you have surgery prior to your chemo or after?
I had it prior.
Prior. Okay. So surgery, then Folfox. And since then you've had a couple of different treatments and surgeries. Is that correct?
That is correct. I subsequently went on 2 other rounds of chemo. So I'd been on 3 rounds altogether. And because, it all really does run together. Eventually you're like, how much torture can I really keep track of?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. anyway, there was a point that I hit where my doctor said, well, let's put you on a maintenance regimen. So instead of getting what I've very affectionately called the thug drugs, which was Folfox, I no longer got the thug drugs, but I got the maintenance drugs, which is still the, excuse me, I think it's the 5FU. No, Zolota, which is the same thing as 5FU. See,
Right.
it's all getting kind of fuzzy, right? So anyway, I had been on the Zolota for a while, and they were noticing that there were some lesions in my liver that were growing. And so there was discussion with my oncologist about, well, we might need to consider chemo. I said, is there anything else? Like, can we just cut it out or something? And he goes, let me talk to an interventional radiologist that I know. So he connected with my interventional radiologist, Dr. Levy, and they discussed ablation. So we know what those terms are. We know what that's all about.
Why don't you explain that to people that are listening that don't know?
Yeah, I would love to, because I really give these things torture names, okay? Yeah. But it feels like that. So I've affectionately named the probe that they use that has the microwave at the end of it to nuke, like quite literally nuke the tumor. I'm like, just think of like a nice probe with a flamethrower on it. And that's what's happening to your liver. It really is getting sizzled. So the first time they went in with the ablation, they had to take care of quite a large area. And it was 2.5 weeks worth of recovery, having to sleep 2 hours after just taking a shower because I was so worn out.
Right.
Not really being able to stay up all day long. And then even certain things changing, like your body odor, or what was the other thing that was really weird? Oh, taste. I was eating the same dinner that everyone else was, and it was chicken. It was just chicken, marinated. And everyone thought, oh, this is really great. And I took a bite, and I thought I was biting into a salt lick. It was so incredibly intense. And then smells also. Yeah. I felt like a pregnant lady, like when they're like, wow, you're 5 rooms away, and you're like, I can smell that, So at that point, I would say that it was frustrating to go through that, because in a sense it was kind of worse than recovering from a partial colectomy. You're like, wow, how can that be worse than going through surgery where they take out a part of your body, And it's just, it really puts to the forefront how important your liver really is to your life, to sustaining life. So after all of the tissue kind of came back to normal, the inflammation subsided, we did another scan and saw that there was still a very, 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 very small sliver around the area where they had ablated that they couldn't get to because of an artery. So somebody who's having this discussion might go, well, that seems lame. Why wouldn't they be able to get it because of an artery?
Right.
Well, apparently because of how we're created with the arteries, and just like anything else that produces heat, it will siphon away the heat from the probe. So they can only get within, so close to this blood vessel before the heat starts to decrease and the efficacy of the probe is diminished. It's amazing what you learn, right? Like you said, You're at a conference and you go, it's in 3 years or in 5 years, or you kind of go, it's a brain explosion of how much you're talking to the doctors and they're like, yeah, I got you. You talk with us, somebody that's never been through it and they're like, I have no clue what you just said. So I also did the Y90 procedure, which is where they put a radioactive beads or seeds that are very, very teeny, but they put millions of them into the blood vessel, and it chokes out the nutrition and oxygen to the lesion. So that's still a to be continued, because I still am waiting on my liver to come back to normal from that. Right. And then they saw another portion that they really wanted to get that's small, and that they are going to address with ablation, because it shares the blood supply with my gallbladder, and if they had treated it with radiation, then they would have also had to have operated and taken out my gallbladder. So it's kind of like, and this is the house that Jack built, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So you've got all these physical things that you've went through. And I appreciate you describing that in detail, because a lot of people, I truly believe in being an advocate for your own health. So the more information that you know, the best, treatment options, I think the best decisions you can make with your treatments. That's one part of the whole situation, right?
Absolutely.
Is the physical side of everything. Because as you endure the physical, you get more knowledge. And I encourage everyone listening right now to truly be your best advocate. Find out as much information about each procedure, each diagnosis, each medication that you're taking, so that way you'll have all the correct information when it comes down to knowing what to expect for sure. So let's talk about the other side of it. So we talked about the side effects and the different treatment stuff that you have. We all go through low moments, and you had several low moments throughout the situation, from the cancer going from stage 3 to stage 4, and then a couple of other things. Why don't you describe maybe what has been? I know you've got more than one, unfortunately, over the past several months, but why don't you describe maybe emotionally, or even, I know we've talked before about financially, like some situations that were going on as well too. Like, describe some of your lowest moments to the young adults listening right now, because you're in your 30s, right? You had your whole life was great until all this happened, and your identity has changed, I would say, based off your diagnosis, because you're a person living with this now instead of not having to worry about this. But why don't you describe some of your lowest moments with us, and really go into detail, because the people listening now will really be able to connect with some of the things that you're going to be able to talk about.
Okay. Well, let's start off with financially, because that's actually a little bit of an easier one to grasp. We all know what it's like to have a job. We know what it's like to get paid. We know what it's like to be able to pay a bill on time, go out to eat, go on a trip, buy gas, all that kind of stuff. And when you're used to that, and all of a sudden you feel like your legs are cut out from underneath you in terms of your earning potential, there's nothing else. I mean, if you are maybe blessed with working for a company that can provide disability, that's awesome. That's one thing. I am technically a independent subcontractor. So my health insurance comes through my husband's work. And then anything that has to do with finances is really, it's money in and money out. There's not a third party,
Right.
So to go from a salary and even a burgeoning student list. I had at one point 45 students that I was teaching, and it was amazing. And currently I am down to about 15. And maybe 8 of them are consistent, because with each turn, with every time I've had to climb back out of the pit, climb back out of this ditch that I've been shoved into because of all the physical stuff, I lose people. So I was even talking with my dad tonight. I said, I need to figure out a business plan or business model that changes it so that I can succeed financially. And, because of cancer, in a way, that's a silver lining, that you start to reach out for resources that maybe you never, ever would have thought about. There are people that are just incredibly, incredibly kind and generous that help in an amazing way. There are, especially for musicians, there's a couple of groups that are, advocates for musicians. They write grants. They will set up a fund that people can, kind of like GoFundMe, except for it's like really specifically around a musician who has a chronic illness. And that happened to me. So financially, while I was not making any money while I was out, not teaching, I did have some security coming in from grants and other things and other fundraisers and stuff that people have done. And then also the fact that they took care of things. More recently, someone from my church paid for a new roof for Matt and me.
Mm-hmm.
They also paid off our refrigerator. And at first I didn't even know how they heard about it. I just happened to mention, oh yeah, we found out we need a new roof. That was it. I didn't go into any detail. And they're like, hey, we want to pay for your roof. I was like, you do realize that's over 10 grand at least, right?
Right.
We're very well aware of this. So to encourage those listening, it is worth your time and endeavor to be resourceful, ask for help, and to also maybe even acquire new skills that don't require you to be in person. You have plenty of time, you
Right.
just got to do it. So let's move on to something that's a little bit harder emotionally. I ascribe to the Christian faith. I believe in Jesus. He's been my Lord and Savior since I was 18. And being able to depend on someone bigger and badder and greater and more, way, way amazing, has allowed for some of the emotional gaps to be filled. Because whenever I've had to rely on a person, that person's going to fail. Not because I'm looking for them to fail. It's just part of human nature. And so I can't keep expecting to get some sort of fulfillment from people it's like emotionally you need an IV, and people can't give you an IV. They can give you like a dose,
Right. I like that. Okay.
So emotionally, it was also very hard to wrap my mind around some of the things that I would have to give up physically. Emotionally, there would be nights where I would be just crying on my husband's chest, broken, because it's like, I don't want to endure this. I never got to the point where I was mad at God, never got to a point where I, like, oh, I want to give up. It never got to that point. But the only thing you can do is just release the emotion and just, and in my case, I had to trust God that he knew what he was doing and has the bigger picture in mind. So, it's a funny thing about emotions and spiritual things. I heard recently from my pastor, we're talking about the disciples, they're in the boat and they're freaking out because there's a storm, and Jesus, rebukes the storm, says, peace, be still, and comforts the disciples. And his comment was, there are many times where God will calm the storm. He's like, but there's also many more times where God will calm the believer in the midst of the storm. And I would say that has definitely happened in my life through this whole entire journey.
Yeah. So, I know another lower moment recently has been taking place in your life. It seems like, when it rains, it pours, I would say, to say the least. As you're battling cancer, as you're fighting for your life, as you're going through the ups and downs emotionally, physically, financially, it seems like when things can't get any worse, then something else happens. And, unfortunately, we're not immune from taking those things on when it happens. And there's no way to describe that, but when it happens, it happens. And, I know you just recently had a loss in your family, a very significant one, as you're going through cancer as well too. Again, the young adults listening to this right now, that's, when death happens, it's out of the blue lots of times. And unfortunately, it doesn't pick and choose whenever you're at your strongest to come at you. So if you wouldn't mind, I know it's a sensitive subject. Would you mind chatting about that just a moment for the people out there listening now? Because I feel like it'd bring a lot of hope to them.
Certainly. I don't mind at all. again, it's sharing your story and connecting on some of the deeper parts of a human level that allow you to walk out your own journey. My mother, as I said, had been battling breast cancer for 15 years, and she also had survived metastatic breast cancer for at least 9. She had had a lumpectomy, she had a bilateral mastectomy, she's had chemo, she's had radiation, she's had clinical trials. I mean, she just went through the gambit. And unfortunately, the disease had metastasized to her liver and her lungs. And she too had gone through the Y90 procedure. The point at which she got it, she had more disease in her liver than I did recently with mine. So in treating her, it just ended up becoming a very slippery slope. And she ended up becoming very, very tired, lethargic. She couldn't catch her breath. Certain things really winded her. And she ended up having to have several pleural effusions where they took the liquid that had formed up around her lungs out. And then after that, they did, I can't remember the name of the procedure right now, but basically it's where they fuse your pleural lining. And the point was so that the liquid, not liquid, what's the word? Chemo moment, chemo brain, water retention, basically fluid retention that would form in the pleural lining of the lung couldn't, form there, but unfortunately it would start forming other places. So we all knew that things were not really getting better. My dad was on a frantic search to try to find some alternative methods of alleviating pain, alleviating the nausea, alleviating just some of the discomfort that she had, and even possibly healing her. But I think at that point it had just gotten too had become too progressed. And I remember one of the last conversations that I had with her was with my sister and my dad, and she was ready to fight to the end. She's like, I'm gonna get through this. And we're all looking at her like, we don't want to tell you that you're not, because we don't want you to lose that fervor and that vivacity that you've had all these years. And unfortunately, my last visit with her was right before Memorial Day. Her birthday actually would always end up either on or near Memorial Day. And for her birthday, we had to call an ambulance, and she passed the following day. So, you see movies where they talk about, oh, so-and-so died from cancer. It's like, why does it have to be cancer? Can it be like something else, Mm-hmm. And then, or they'll show this person and it's like almost kind of peaceful, and they almost have this glow about them. That's a load of crap. I mean, it is not real. It's ugly. Death is ugly. And you wonder why it's so grievous. It's like, it's one of the most terrible things. It wasn't meant for us. We weren't supposed to have it. Mm-hmm. That was not what was in the original plan. Plan A was there would be no death. Plan B happened instead. So watching that and going through that, especially with somebody that I love so dearly, and then having to watch my dad go through it, and watch my sister go through it, watch my aunt, my mom's sister go through it, and other family members, it feels like it's going to be crushing. It feels like you're a beach ball that's getting pushed underwater. And at that point, I think the person, whether you have cancer or not, whether you have a chronic illness or not, whether, there's certain things going on in your life, whether you feel strong, whether you feel weak, whether you feel like you can't handle anymore, it really is that point where you have to give it that 1 more %. Just, that's the name of your podcast. It's that 1 more % to go, I am going to step past this.
Right.
You have to. So, yeah.
So just kind of recapping some of the things you said you had a great life. Everything was thriving. You were, the physical, the financial, the emotional, everything was great. And, you get diagnosed with cancer. And then a little later, your mother passes from cancer, and you have every reason in the world to be depressed and miserable and hopeless and all those other things. Yet you're not.
No.
What kind of advice do you have to the young adults listening right now who are experiencing cancer, who maybe are feeling those things, the anxiety, the depression, the hopelessness, all those things? Like, what kind of advice do you have that you would want to share with them specifically? Whether it's, I already kind of know what you're going to say, but just because we've had this conversation before, and I absolutely love your answer. But
if I can remember it.
I know, right?
You tell me, what did I say? No.
Right. But what kind of advice do you have to the young adults listening right now who maybe are going down that depression mode and don't have any hope, and who can take a lot of the strength that you have, because you have a lot, and I'm not saying you don't have a reason to, but you have an abundance of hope and strength. I know people can't see you right now and stuff, but when you look at you, you can see, like, your smile is infectious, and you can really transfer a lot of hope and energy, and you're going to have to do it through people's ears today. But what is it that you would say that would be great advice for a young adult to give them hope to keep fighting and keep pushing forward?
Now I feel like I'm on the ball to remember what it was I said. Like you said, a lot has happened in the very short period of time between when I first talked with you and I'm now talking with you. And one of the pieces of advice that I would have is, really what came to mind was, first, actually take the stuff that helps you with that. I will tell you what, I have been on an anti-anxiety medication that has done wonders just to alleviate some of the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the things, self-care, being able to talk to somebody, get a counselor, get somebody who, like you were talking about, where there's patient advocacy at certain facilities, whether it's Cancer Centers of America or MD Anderson, or maybe you're wherever you are. The second thing, which I think trumps that actually, is being able to cast all your burdens on the Lord. To be able to put that much trust in someone who knows your inmost being, who knows every fiber of your soul, knows all the hairs on your head, all the years of your life, to be able to fully put your trust in somebody that has the power to change those things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a relief. There's something that you just go, okay, that's one less thing I have to think about or worry about. And I would say just in being able to have that anchor has allowed me to navigate some very, very tough waters without sinking. The other piece of advice that I'd have for young adults that are going through this isn't it. This is what you're currently facing is not it. We are on the cusp of medical breakthroughs every single day. Even my oncologist, he's always reading updates on clinical trials, on all of the possible treatments that could help somebody that is in, say, my position, where immunotherapy will not work, and it's more conventional chemotherapy that does work, to exhaust your possibilities and see what other cancer centers might have available for you. But also not being able to excuse me, 2 words just collided. Feeling like you have to change what you're doing if it's working. If you like your oncologist, if you are in a position that, treatment is working, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to suck. It's going to be awful. you just can't get around it. There's no way. We're not going to sugarcoat any of this, but you're going to get past it.
Right.
And there's always a silver lining. There's always something better around the bend that happens as a result of trial. One thing I've been talking to people about lately, students will come to me and say, well, I want to do music because I want to inspire people. And what I've learned lately about inspiration is it comes at the cost of the person who's doing the inspiring. The inspiration comes at a very heavy cost. We don't look at an Olympic athlete and get inspired because they ran a mile and then went and did nothing the rest of the day. No, they trained the whole entire time and then they won this race by milliseconds. Or we don't get inspired by somebody even like you or I, who have been able to walk through some of the most painful journeys that we could possibly think of and come out on the other side and say, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have hope. I can trust God, and I'm going to fight.
I believe that, we are responsible for doing absolutely as much for ourselves as we can. And that goes back to the first thing that you were saying was, asking for help. We're responsible for, not holding things inside of us when a million things are coming at you. If you've got questions, if you've got just thoughts or feelings that you need to process, asking for help was one of the first things that you said. And taking products like anti-anxiety products, any kind of other supplements or anything along those lines that you feel like helps you go through this, you've earned the right to take whatever you need as you go through this.
Yeah.
That's what it's there for. Don't feel bad about that.
Right.
And your faith. And again, I believe that we're responsible for doing everything that we can do. And then God just comes over top of that and does the things that we can't do. And
absolutely. Well put.
You mentioned to me a situation last time we talked about a financial situation that you guys had. Like the people at work had did something for you. And I think that's a great example of this piece of advice. If you don't mind taking like a quick second to tell that story, because I think it's a huge faith builder, because like you said earlier, you guys were, things were going well financially. You had 45 students and all of a sudden you're down to 15. So you have a third of your students and you have to wonder about paying bills and all those things, which is real life. And, but something happened at your job and they did something. And I'd love for you to be able to share that, because I think this is a true example of we've done as much as we can do, but then God comes in and does things that we can't do. Do you mind sharing that?
I don't mind one bit. I love to brag on my boss, Jan Smith. She's one of the most generous people I know. And I found out more of the extent of her generosity after I found out that I had cancer. When I was first in the hospital, she came to the hospital to visit me, and she gave me an application to put in for a grant that would cover some of the costs of being in there. And she already had a good relationship with the woman with this organization. It's called Music Cares. And because she did that, I was able to get a very big chunk of my medical costs taken care of. But then she was going to have a 60th birthday party, and it was going to be this big event. She was going to play with a lot of her former band members, and she leveraged it. She turned it into a fundraiser for me. So completely unbeknownst to me, it was a complete bomb that just dropped in the middle of a staff meeting.
Right.
That she was going to do that. So we planned this thing, and for her 60th birthday, she ended up raising about $90,000, some of which went to cover costs of, obviously putting on this kind of a party. But I was able to get basically a year's salary worth of financial help through Sweet Relief Musicians Fund, who set up the fund, and was able to pay bills, go to the grocery store, and even get superfluous things that you're like, well, why would you want to go buy clothes when you don't have much money? It's like, well, your body changes when you
Right.
go through cancer, so you gotta need to be able to, not look completely awful, but maybe just like a half awful,
Yeah.
So yeah, she yeah, that was an amazing thing, and it really boosted my appreciation for her as a person, but then also increased my trust in the Lord for providing something that I didn't do a single thing to
Yeah.
deserve or merit. Mm-hmm.
So you got the grant, and then she threw a party. Basically her birthday party turned into a fundraiser for you. And,
Yes.
you received, so they basically donated a year's worth of salary to you to help cover all the medical bills. I think it's absolutely amazing. And man, it's so great when God comes through. And again, we're doing all we can do. You're trying to work as hard as you can. You're sick. You're taking time off just to recover and doing all those things. And then all of a sudden those bills get paid. And, I'm assuming all up until this day, again, it's part of it. Like you may not have all the luxuries and everything else that, you want, I would say, but it seems like you got everything that you need. And that's so important. And, I love hearing your story. I love that. That's one of the main things that I took from our conversation the last time we had it was, what a wonderful gift, what a wonderful thing to come in and play a huge role into your life. It just, the way everything's all connected like that, I think is absolutely amazing.
Absolutely.
So, I thank you for sharing your story, just the pieces of your story, the emotional side, the ups and the downs, and, the way that life can come at you with all these different things. But one big takeaway I'm getting from your story today is just because you have cancer doesn't mean normal life doesn't continue to go financially, spiritually, with your relationships, with your family, all those things. But really taking an inventory of yourself and seeing exactly what you need and providing yourself with what you need, having faith. And, one of the last things you said was there's always a silver lining, and, this isn't it. You have something else to look forward to in life. So I'm asking all of our listeners today, just take those pieces of advice, ask for help, have faith, and just realize that there's greater things coming, whether it's immunotherapy, whether it's different, progressions in cancer treatments, whether it's huge blessings coming your way, whether it's someone hearing your story and being inspired, like I'm sure you guys are from Erica's story today, that, there's just more to it than the misery and then the thoughts that you can have, when things are at their absolute worst. So Erica, if people want to get in touch with you, I know you have a blog out, which I love reading, by the way. Why don't you share how they can connect with you with your blog, your email, and even on social media?
The blog is www.thetruthitworks.com. That would be the best web address to go to. Instagram, I am evhoff214. And I would say I frequent those two the most in terms of posting anything. Is there 1 second, just one last thing I could share?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you were talking about when life deals you a lot of blows. When my mom had passed, she'd asked for a celebration of life. She didn't want a funeral. She didn't want to go to church. She didn't want mourning. She wanted a party. And that was just really indicative of the kind of woman that she was. When my mom passed, she wanted a celebration of life instead of a funeral. And she didn't want mourning. She wanted a party. She wanted it to be food and dancing and fun because that was so much of who she was. And so she tasked my sister and my dad and me with throwing this party. And of course, here I am in Atlanta and they're in Tampa. And we're just like, what? How are we supposed to do this? A party? So, okay, fine. We spent 3 months, my dad really spent 3 months planning this party. We got their favorite live band, the Black Honkies, to play. And they got this really wonderful restaurant and okay, so we got this whole thing planned, and right before we have to do this celebration, and I say do the celebration because none of us wanted to really be there, but we'll honor mom. My dad finds out that he has stage 2 pancreatic cancer. Right before he has to give this speech and this celebration in my mom's honor. And long story short, we come to find out that he's going to have to be on a very, very similar medicine to Folfox. They got it out. They were able to resect part of his pancreas. Did I say liver?
It's a pancreas.
Okay, good. Chemo moment. So pancreas, and there's actually a really great outlook for that. So what's been interesting to me is that here I am 3 years later, having been through the pump, having been through different chemo treatments, and I am able to talk to my dad on a very real level and say, this is what you can expect. And he can go into his oncologist appointment and not be just completely not knowing, providing some sort of sense of grounding for him. So, like I said, things are, like you said, things are going to come at you, whether you're strong or not, and you just have to deal with them. But it's amazing the silver lining of, well, thankfully I got to go through it, and hopefully we'll be able to encourage my dad through it as well.
I love it. Every time we talk, I'm telling you, I'm just drawn into everything that you're saying, because I told you this before, I really look up to you in a lot of ways, just from your attitude, from your strength, from just the way you're comfortable sharing your story, the advocacy that, you're really big with the cancer advocacy as far as different groups, different events you've been a part of at the Capitol and things of that nature and stuff as well too. This is something that's part of your life, and you've embraced it, and you're fighting for it, and you're fighting for yourself and your family, and you're carrying on a legacy, and you're doing all that. And then just the power of God's really just moving you along here and there to the right people and to the right ears. And those some of those ears are mine. So I really appreciate that. I think the world of you. I'm so excited for you. Be sure to check out Erica's blog on thetruththatworks.com and follow her on Instagram at EVEHOFF214. Is that correct? All right, perfect. Well, Erica, again, really appreciate it. And I want to encourage everyone to continue to follow up with you, to reach out to you, share what your story has meant to them, to you. And if you have any kind of questions, be sure to let me know as well too. I'd love to be able to connect you with Erica as well. So Erica, thank you for being a guest on the show today, and looking forward to all the great things that are going to be happening in your life. Okay.
Thank you, Truett. Appreciate it.
We appreciate you spending time with us on today's episode and encourage you to continue the conversation to help you keep pushing forward. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as ways to recommend a guest and connect to Truett personally, head over to 1%podcast.com. Be sure to join us next time for more stories of inspiration right here with Truett Taylor on the 1% Podcast.